Okay, one of the craziest things about Godzilla x Kong, in my personal opinion, is how big Suko is. He's so much bigger than Kong was in Skull Island, which is just a crazy concept because he seems so childish. Kong had to grow up super fast, like fighting skull crawlers from basically birth, though it's just very different upbringings, but it's so trippy how much bigger he is than Kong in Skull Island. Like, can you just imagine Skull Island with a giant Suko instead of Kong? It'd be freaking crazy. I feel like Suko would just eat everybody. It'd be horrific. Either way, Goji Center's made a video discussing this very same thing, which I'm super into because it's crazy. Leave a like, subscribe to Goji Center, and let's get into it.
Godzilla Kong, the New Empire, introduced us for the first time to the rest of the great apes in live action.
Okay, I'm the only person I've ever seen call it Godzilla x Kong. Is everyone just calling it Godzilla Kong? Does that not sound weird to anybody else?
But these weren't just any simians, these were Hollow Earth great apes. And because they resided in this environment and not on Skull Island, we are now dealing with different rule sets regarding the growth of these monsters. The task for today is to explain why the adolescent Kong from the film Kong Skull Island is smaller in stature than Suko,
Insane.
an infant. Yes, if this is your first time hearing this fact, this may sound a little bizarre.
Now I'm thinking about Kong from Skull Island as one of those weird little buff 7-year-olds you randomly see. You're like, what the crap is up with that kid? Like, Kong is that, basically.
How is an infant taller in stature than a teenager? Well, in this episode, we will discuss exactly why Suko managed to grow taller than Kong when he was a teenager, and go as far as explaining how Kong managed to grow taller than most of the great apes in Hollow Earth. Pay close attention because you don't want to miss any details. Subscribe and get ready to watch Suko's and Kong's growth rate explained.
I think Kong just tried to riz me up back there.
To begin explaining this weird phenomenon, we must first match up who we are talking about. Suko in Godzilla Kong the New Empire measured approximately 149 feet in height.
That's crazy.
For reference, that is just 2 feet shorter than the Statue of Liberty. Very, very tall nonetheless.
Dude, I feel like the Statue of Liberty is way bigger than I think it is.
Pay attention to how this one has infant proportions.
He looks like a small child.
Infants are often characterized as having an enlarged head, large eyeballs, and a small body in comparison to its skull. This is what makes a baby look like a baby.
Bro, Suko made
As your
this
body
movie.
grows to adolescence, your skull tends to grow at a slower rate than the rest of your body. This is why adults, in most cases, have a smaller head in comparison to their bodies, giving them the said adult body proportions that make them look like full-grown individuals.
That's
Suko,
crazy.
as you can see, can be categorized as an infant due to these characteristics. Now comes the adolescent Kong from 1973. This one was considered a teenager. You'll immediately note that its body proportions resemble that of an adult more than an infant. Kong, however, only measures 104 feet in height here.
I think this would be the most interesting, craziest 1v1 possible in the entire Monsterverse right here.
A whole 45 feet shorter than this infant. This is where most people scratch their heads and wonder, how is this even possible? Well, the answer lies in where these two grew up. Suko here grew up in a place known as Hollow Earth. Down in the bowels of the planet lies an incomprehensibly vast environment with resources to adequately sustain large life forms. Kong, on the other hand, grew up in Skull Island, an isolated island somewhere in the Pacific that is often described as Hollow Earth come to the surface, a mini version of the flora-fauna that is found in Hollow Earth. Here's one of the reasons why Suko was already taller than Kong, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more reasoning behind this.
What's that mean, like bigger food?
Enjoying this episode? Here's a quick reminder to subscribe and to also click the link below to check out our official Goji Center merch, as well as graphic tees showcasing the most powerful predators of all time.
For one, that new Megalodon shirt is freaking incredible. But also, I feel like Kong was eating the Kraken and stuff like that. Like, Kong had some big food relatively, but I guess that is a possibility. Like, Suko just had some really big bananas.
For better context, we'll have to go back to the graphic novel Skull Island, Birth of Kong. We are introduced to a tribe of these great apes that lived here on Skull Island.
Female Kong boobs are
these
crazy.
Apes don't really measure up to the size of adult Kong, who measures 337 feet in height. These apes were a little less than 2/3 of Kong's adult form. But why? Let us explain.
So weird.
Here on Skull Island, growth rates are different from that of Hollow Earth apes due to environmental and biological constraints. size. Hollow Earth is practically infinitely more vast than this island, limiting the growth cap of these creatures. Additionally, these great apes seem to have suffered from a phenomenon known as indeterminate growth, meaning that factors such as space, food quality, resources, and most importantly stress were a major reason why these guys never reached the height of the larger Hollow Earth apes.
They do look
being
stressed
capped
out
in
as
height at
hell.
around 200 feet or so. Stress was likely the larger factor here. It is
Every one of those Kongs down in Hollow Earth had like patches of hair missing in multiple spots. They all look like freaking shelter pets, dude.
a well-known fact that these apes shared this island with the skull crawlers. Vicious, relentless predators that when not sleeping were always hunting. The rivalry between these two species reached a point where they began killing each other in large numbers. This was perhaps the biggest stressor that limited the growth of these apes. Eventually, this conflict was rendered down to a last stand where many apes, including Kong's parents, were killed.
That's so sad. If Kong was there, if they got to their natural large size that they could have been, they would have destroyed the skull crawlers. I never even thought about that.
The finishing blow inflicted by Ramarak, the assassin that killed Kong's parents right before his very eyes. Not only that, but this happened immediately after he was born. If that's not stressful enough, then imagine being a 40-foot infant ape on an island full of predators with absolutely no one to take care of you. If anything, the stress would have only been higher for infant Kong than the stress inflicted on a whole group of apes with each other to rely on under the threat of skull crawlers. Further evidence of this increased stress on Kong, consider that apes, including us humans, usually surpass half of the height of the parents by adolescence in most cases. This Kong in 1973 only gets past this threshold by a bare minimum. Something is a little bit off here. Kong between infancy and adolescence has grown less than he should. Why? Stress. Ramarak was still around, and the presence of this one plus the remaining predators would have made Kong go through the said indeterminate growth, limiting his potential greatly. Between infancy and early stages of adolescence, this smaller Kong would develop the previously mentioned adult proportions, but not adolescent height.
Dude, this shot right here is specifically what I'm thinking of. Can you imagine it's Suko and it's like way bigger and child-shaped and absolutely just, I imagine, gonna eat everybody. Like just a curious child munching everyone's heads off in some horrific freaking like Attack on Titan thing. Cannot imagine.
It was after he managed to kill Ramarak that he finally was able to unlock full growth potential. Not only did he kill the most dangerous predators around, but he now had a whole ecosystem all to himself, establishing himself as the apex predator on the island, and close to nothing was able to challenge his spot on the food chain.
Damn, that's
This
so
is why
true.
it was mentioned in GVK that he grew very fast in very little time, more than 233 feet in only 51 years. But this did not just stop here. Ironically, Kong ended up growing taller than many of the great apes in Hollow Earth thanks to having the island all to himself. Let's go back to Suko. Hollow Earth apes would be around the same size as a full-grown Kong, meaning that proportionally speaking, their infants would by default be around this height, which so happens to be around the size of teenager Kong, whose parents suffered through some sort of dwarfism due to ecological circumstances discussed already.
Damn, bro,
This is
dwarfism.
why infant Kong was so small also, because his parents were small compared to Hollow Earth apes. Suko admittedly was not a newborn infant. We'd like to think that Suko was the equivalent of an 8 to 11-year-old.
That makes
Not quite
sense.
the adolescent, but also not a newborn infant. One who lived long enough to endure and remember the abuse inflicted on him by the Scar King, and one able to fight back if attacked. An adolescent Suko would then adopt the characteristics of a subadult great ape, a lengthened body, limbs, and smaller head compared to his body.
Dude, just side note, also, I'm so excited to see what an adult Suko looks like. Like, basically a really young Scar King. It's gonna look so crazy.
Similar to his parents, whoever they were, but most likely Scar King himself being the father.
Yeah.
That's right. In a scene during the film, we can very quickly witness an interesting detail in Scar King's throne room. Upon getting up and roaring, a few female apes began to shelter their offspring from the Scar King. What color were they? Brownish red, identical to Suko. Which brings up the next question.
He's gonna have so many
if Scar King
siblings.
actually was the one who fathered Suko, how tall could this guy actually get? And could he outgrow Kong? Well, given that all things in the Monsterverse could literally be a dumb writer's pen stroke away from becoming reality, we can't predict whether or not Suko will be taller or not.
I'm so happy that they chose that scene with the keyboard, and because I complain about that in my Discord at least several times a week. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm so happy that they put that in there.
However, based on the parents of Suko alone, we can predict that he might be a little taller than or around the same size as Scar King.
He's
who
gonna
was
be
at around
amazing.
318 feet in height. Scar King belonged to a species of great ape that was more lanky and agile instead of muscular like his adoptive father Kong. Suko's mother was probably one that resembled Kong a little more, with characteristics similar to a larger gray or brown gorilla. So, based on his parents alone, Suko should end up looking like this.
He's gonna be a
But
crazy
if we
hybrid.
account for the
That's so
effects
exciting.
Of Hollow Earth, much more vast prey variety, and being looked after properly by a father figure, Suko might end up larger and more powerful than we think. There is still more to learn about the race of these great apes and their different kinds. Subscribe to not miss our episode explaining the many different types of ape titans seen so far in the Monsterverse. More episodes covering Godzilla, Kong, the New Empire, and more kaiju fights.
Oh, hell yeah. I've been thinking about Kamazotz a lot lately. That kaiju, this kaiju here, the bat kaiju, that was like, because he was living under Skull Island, right? And then the storm hit, and I don't know what he's up to lately, but this thing is freaking, it's like supersonic screech, could vaporize humans. It's just nuts. A lot of people gave Scar King crap because he wasn't necessarily that strong, but the dude was like thousands of years old. So just like imagine how Suko's gonna be, like a young, youthful version. When Kong's thousands of years old, if he's putting up as much of a fight as Scar King did, I'll be impressed. Like, dude's holding it together. This video was exciting though. I love the whole like monkey aspect that's going on. I also just realized that Scar King's nose makes an adorable little heart, and now I see him so much more adorably. Either way, leave a like, subscribe to Goji Center, and I'll see you next time.